It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Conversations with Joan. Conversations with Joan will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life's Conversations with Joan. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Conversations with Joan focuses on topics that are important to your life, from health and wellness to professional development to personal well-being. Change makers join me to share their insights, tips, and strategies so you can thrive and live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Now, let's start talking. Not all end-of-life experiences are alike. Death can come suddenly, or a person may linger in a near-death state. It's common to wonder what happens when someone is dying and how you can provide comfort and care. Joining us today to talk about end-of-life care is Elizabeth Uslander, the co-founder of Empowered Endings and co-author of Exploring Your End-of-Life Options. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Joan.
Elizabeth, death is a difficult topic, and most of us will do anything to avoid talking about it. How important is it for us to plan for our end-of-life care?
Well, I think the first thing is that, everybody's in a different place in life. And so if someone doesn't feel ready to explore their end-of-life planning in depth, that's okay. But it's certainly really valuable to do, and it's really valuable to do it early on, thinking about what your values are, what's most important to you in life, and how that might impact your goals and wishes as your health changes and as your family needs to support you through some of the transitions that may come, can really help to optimize the experience down the line so that you're having conversations instead of navigating crises, and really putting in place the resources to help support a gentle journey.
Whenever you talk about healthcare or insurance issues, it's very easy to become overwhelmed. So how can we learn how to navigate these systems?
Well, it's actually really tough to do in the healthcare system. Advanced care planning is part of the insurance-based model, but they only offer a 15-minute conversation with your physician. So it's really good to do some research and find resources outside of the system, in my experience. We at Empowered Endings offer robust advanced care and end-of-life planning, and I know that there are other doctors and end-of-life doulas throughout the country who do the same. And basically, these are people who understand what the end-of-life journey may hold, and who take the time to understand who you are, what you want, what you need, and how what they know and understand about the journey can inform making good decisions around planning, so that, again, your choices are aligned with your wishes, and that everyone that's helping you through the journey is understanding what's important to you and how you would like it to go.
So you've been doing this work and you've worked with so many people. When we consider our wishes, so many of us don't even know what we want. So are there ways that we can discern what our wishes would be?
I think the best way is really starting to have the conversations with people who have been through it. So my husband, who's my partner in business, is a physician of 35 years. He was an ER doctor and now is a palliative care and end-of-life care doctor. And he's just one example of the kind of person who, if you spend time talking about what you're concerned about, maybe you have a family health history, maybe you have a personal health history, maybe you have a complex illness, and you don't really know what's going to happen or what may be in store for you, speaking to someone who has the experience of having been with people in those journeys and who can elucidate some of the pitfalls and help you understand some of the resources that would be really valuable. I think that's the best way to begin the process, because you start to experience a process yourself of an evolving understanding of what's important to you, and you get the information you need that you might not otherwise have to consider things that you wouldn't know to consider.
Because when
dementia.
I was going to say, when you try to go it alone, the mistakes you make can be costly, because if you don't understand how to fund a particular type of care, you could end up losing your assets when you may not have had to.
Yeah, and I think even more than financially, I think the impact of the experiences that people go through. So I was just going to say about dementia, a lot of people have experienced a really challenging journey with a loved one through dementia and have clarity, for example, that they would not want to go through that and they would not want to put their family through that. And so exploring how to plan for those things, and whether it's the financial resources or the medical resources or the emotional resources, putting those things in place, getting connected with providers who can help you and your family when the time comes. Those are all really, really valuable ways to help make sure you're not going it alone and that your loved ones aren't dealing with a crisis and not really knowing where to turn and what to do.
When you end up in a hospital setting, you tend to relinquish your care to the experts, so to speak. You let them do whatever they need to do to you. But how much say do we have in our care? What rights do patients have?
Patients have all the rights. We have the right to request care and refuse care. I think, as you say, the difficulty is not necessarily knowing what's available or what's appropriate. There are experts, right? The doctors are the experts, and the nurses have been providing this care, and so they do really know and understand a great deal more than we might about what's happening to our bodies and what could happen. But that's, I think, why it's so important to have an advocate with us when we are experiencing any kind of medical event and needing care. Having someone who's with us, who knows and understands our wishes, and even has the documentation that evidences those wishes, can really help direct the care. So rather than going into the hospital and just sort of assuming that everything's going to go the way that you would hope it would go, having someone there with you to make sure that they're asking questions and getting support when it might not necessarily be available, or in a way that might not necessarily be available, but that you want and need, and they can help advocate to make sure that you get.
Yeah, I think that's important. I went through this with both of my parents, and each time I remember saying, I feel sorry for people that don't have someone in there as their advocate, because when you're in a vulnerable position, when you're sick or dying, you tend to not have a voice, and you do need someone there watching out for you, making sure that your wishes are followed.
For sure. And in the same way that it takes a village to raise a family, I think it takes a village to navigate this transition as well. And it's important to have people who can walk with you through it, whether that's a family member or a friend or even a professional that you bring along for the ride. It's really important to have that village so that your voice isn't lost and so that you get what you need, even if you're not able to ask for it.
A lot of people are familiar with doulas when it comes to maternity care with a delivery of a child, but now we hear a lot about a death doula. What is a death doula, and what role does that person play?
The death doulas are a really interesting movement right now. As you described, it's very similar in concept to a birth doula. So way back in the day, birthing was a holistic family process. And then at some point it became a medicalized process where it was just a doctor and a pregnant mother in a hospital. And even at a point in time when no family was allowed to be involved, and there were certainly no holistic options available. And through the birthing movement, a great deal more was offered in terms of education, information, resources regarding women's health, and a great deal more opportunities were developed in terms of holistic options. So now, when someone is pregnant, they have the choice to plan for a hospital pregnancy or plan for an at-home birth or a birth at a holistic birthing center. They have the opportunity to go through that whole pregnancy and birthing process, largely guided by birth doulas and midwives. There are doctors involved to make sure that the health of the baby and the mother are intact along the way. And of course, if there's an emergency, you can always go get the appropriate medical care. But there is this option to have a very holistic process that is designed explicitly by the new parents with the help of the doulas. Death doulas are effectively the same thing. They are helping to make the end-of-life journey a more holistic and personalized experience, not just for the patient, but also for the family. So people can have the opportunity, instead of going back into the hospital over and over and over again to decide that they would like at a certain point in time, under certain circumstances, to stay home and receive comfort care instead of trying to go back to the hospital and receive curative care, just as an example. There are people who would like to have family legacies and rituals, and doulas can help to plan those things and bring together other resources to support the family as well as the patient in the journey. Doulas can also provide grief support. They can provide anticipatory grief support as things are starting to change, and then they can provide ongoing bereavement support, having already come to deeply know and connect with the patient and their family. And they can provide really any kind of emotional, spiritual, practical, and bereavement support throughout the process, as well as bring in other important resources like medical care. Like our medical group works closely with doulas in the community who are supporting people through this journey, and at some point they realize that they need in-home medical care that the healthcare system doesn't offer, and so they invite us to come in and see how we might be able to support them at home so that they can stay home and stay surrounded by their family and loved ones, but also still get the care that they need to be comfortable and feel well.
The way you described that births used to be, they were a family event in the home and everyone was involved in it. And that's how deaths used to be. They were just a natural part of living, and people died in their homes with their families. But somewhere along the line, we sterilized it and we moved it outside of the family and the home. Do you think that's why so many people fear it because it's not part of our daily life? And do you see a trend going back to the way it used to be?
I think that's a great idea. I don't know the research on it, but I would certainly deign to guess that that's very much the case. People used to be connected to the experience of death and dying by virtue of it being in their homes and being present to their loved ones through the process. So a natural dying process can take a very long time. It's not just the days before the transition occurs. It can be years of illness and treatment and various forms of decline and changes. And that's something that people, even children, used to be around as they were supporting their loved ones through the journey in intergenerational homes. Our society, as you say, we don't have those experiences available to us anymore. Death is mostly in the hospital. We've sort of defaulted to going to the hospital when something happens. And then once you're in the hospital, again, unless you have that advocate, you're really just sort of part of the system, and the default mode of the system is to provide curative and often aggressive care, irrespective of the potential outcomes. And so now the family is separated from the experience. The children are no longer around. No one's talking about it the way that they used to. And it is a bit scary. It can be scary to be hospitalized, institutionalized. You don't know what's going to happen next. It can be scary to not have someone like a family doctor. They used to have doctors that would, come to the house and guide you along the way. Those people knew and understood what was potentially coming, and they were able to inform and educate the family each step of the way.
Elizabeth, what you were just describing, it sounds like that's what a death doula will bring us back to, and it may actually be one of the benefits that can come out of that horrific COVID pandemic, because people started working from home. A lot of people still are. They're continuing, so they may be able to care for family members in the home once again.
That would be wonderful. If that's the case, that would be absolutely wonderful. And I think you're right that the death doula movement can really make a big change in helping people to stay connected in home around these transitions and feel more robustly supported. One of our primary goals in the work that we're doing, so we have a medical group that provides the care, but we also have an institute, and a huge part of what we are trying to do is to help integrate doulas into the medical system. At this point, they're not a part of the medical system. The only way really that a doula can be part of traditional healthcare is to serve as a volunteer for hospice. And by partnering with doulas, by having a physician who partners with doulas in day-to-day care, we're hoping to set the example that it is a really powerful partnership that can really optimize the journey, not just actually for the patients and families, but also for the collaborating providers who have someone who is in home with the family, companioning and guiding them every step of the way, and can help relieve some of the burden on the family in terms of assuaging their anxieties, but also on the providers who aren't able to be in the home with the patient and family all the time and who aren't necessarily accessible to answer questions in the middle of the night, that create some of the stressors around and even traumas at times around the experience in the traditional healthcare system. So they serve as a really powerful bridge, I think, between all of these different elements that are already in place, and I think a very important part of the evolution of end-of-life care in our country.
Elizabeth, how does medical aid in dying fit into the planning process, and is it legal, or where do you see it going legally in the future?
So medical aid in dying is a legal end-of-life option in 11 jurisdictions in the U.S., so 10 states and Washington, D.C. There's an organization, Compassion and Choices, which is a legislative lobbying organization, and they're working with other states to legalize medical aid in dying there. It's an option whereby a physician takes a patient and their loved ones through a process of exploration and discernment. If a patient has a terminal illness, they can ask their doctor for medication that would allow them to go to sleep and transition quickly within typically a couple of hours. The physician, who is the attending physician for this process, explores with the patient what it is that they're experiencing, their health history, all of their options, talks with them about what's possible in all of the different directions that they may wish to go, and helps them to discern what it is that they want and need for their care and treatment. And ultimately, if the patient wishes for this medication, there's a legal process where a second doctor is involved, and there are a number of different protective measures in place for this legal process. But at the end of it, if the patient qualifies and all of the doctors agree, they are prescribed a medication that they can take at the time of their choice, which again allows them to fall asleep and have a very peaceful and gentle death and transition. It's something that is certainly not for everyone, but there are a lot of people who would like to avoid the suffering that they are experiencing or that they know is coming with their terminal illness. And interestingly, sort of going back to the analogy of a birthing, a pregnant woman is going to have a baby. Whether they have the baby one way or another way kind of depends on the health of the baby and the experience that the mother is having. So a C-section is one way for a pregnant woman to have a baby. It's a medical intervention, and it changes the course of things, but ultimately it's the same outcome with a very healthy mother and a very healthy baby. So medical aid in dying, in a similar analogy, is a medical intervention, but the outcome is the same. The person who is asking for this support has a terminal diagnosis with a short-term prognosis, which means that multiple doctors agree that they will, if given the natural course of their disease, die within 6 months. And they are using this medical intervention to make it a smoother, gentler, more dignified process for them and in any case for their support system, if that's something that they're all aligned in.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, without getting political, do you think that this is something we will see legally across the country?
I think that it's becoming more and more available. This is something that has been legal in Oregon for over 20 years, been legal in Washington State for decades, and it's been legal in California since 2016. Well, it was put into law in 2015 and then activated in 2016. And over the last handful of years, more and more states have legalized it. I think that it's something that a lot of people understand as an option for empowerment, and that in the places where autonomy and agency are most valued, it will be something that is fought for, and I think that more and more people will have access to it, but I'm not sure how widely it will spread ultimately.
So going back to what we said in the beginning of the conversation, these are conversations that no one wants to have for whatever reason. A parent doesn't want to bring it up with a child doesn't want to bring it up with a parent. How do we get people talking? How do you get this conversation started?
Well, I think the first thing is to just realize there's really nothing to be afraid of. I mean, a lot of people don't bring it up because they are perhaps afraid that talking about it might make it more real, or they're afraid that talking about it might upset someone, like you said, parent or child that they would like to speak with. In my experience, if we address things with gentle confidence, curiosity, and compassion, even if the first response is not a positive one, with education, with access to information, and with the ability to sort of stay calm, even if it's a challenging conversation, things start to change. The dynamic of those conversations start to change. So there's an example I'm thinking of in particular where a mother was terrified of their daughter's work in this field and also conversations about end-of-life care and planning, and was just viscerally unable to consider or communicate about it. And then she was invited to a lecture where a couple of doctors were talking about the importance of palliative care and how palliative care can support optimal end-of-life care. And she came to understand that having the conversation really doesn't make this happen. It actually gives us an opportunity to ensure that it happens well, and that there's really nothing to be afraid of in talking about it, because talking about it actually helps us live and die better. So I think just being really patient, if this is a conversation that one wants or needs to have, bringing it up in a very gentle way, letting people be as uncomfortable as they are, and just continuing to gently offer the information or the opportunity to have a change of heart and to understand that it doesn't have to be a scary conversation. It doesn't have to be an intense thing. And the earlier you do that, the more true that becomes, because you have more time to sort of ease into the idea of exploring it.
And you have a wonderful guide available. It's entitled Exploring Your End-of-Life Options. And if our listeners would like to learn more about Elizabeth and her work, you can visit empoweredendings.com. Elizabeth, in about 30 seconds or less, what is the takeaway? What would you like to leave our listeners with?
I think the thing that's most important is just realizing that you really can have empowerment and autonomy and dignity in your journey. And by working closely together with your loved ones and with your providers, you can put in place the things that you need to optimize it so that you can have an empowered end-of-life experience.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joan, for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided is the opinion of our guest and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, CYACYL.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read our digital articles, and be sure to subscribe to our mailing list. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.